Imagine a future where the ocean becomes a giant boiling pot, scalding and toxic to the point that marine creatures are forced to struggle relentlessly, fighting each day just to adapt and survive. The phenomenon of ocean warming has penetrated deep into waters where dissolved oxygen levels have become too low to sustain life. In a distant realm, the ice at Earth's poles is melting at an alarming rate, and rising sea levels are submerging many cities. Yet this is merely part of a far worse nightmare. Inland, the scorching, blistering heat claims thousands of lives with each successive heatwave. Our bodies cannot withstand such extreme temperature pressure. Climate change and erratic rainfall have led to incessant flooding, while simultaneously increasing the devastating severity of storms. You see, climate change, particularly the shift in temperatures, can lead to extremely severe consequences. And then many began to ask the question, can we survive in a world that is gradually collapsing like this? The truth is, our Earth has experienced periods of climate change far more severe than recent projections. As you can see, to survive, all species are constantly forced to adapt, and one of the most admirable adaptations comes from our very own ancestors. In the first episode, our ancestors miraculously survived the extinction event caused by the Ice Age. But to have endured all the way to the present day, that is a far more difficult achievement. Living on an ever-changing planet, adaptability is the ultimate key. And that crucial key is about to be unlocked more clearly than ever before in the next 30 minutes. Human History, Volume 3, Earth's Climate Change Through the Ages. Adapt or Perish. Primordial. I hope everyone is ready for today's journey of discovery. Please note, we are still in the midst of our long-running series on human history and Earth's history in general, which is built upon the foundation of evolutionary theory. We now invite you to proceed with the following main content. In January 1987, a dark blue ship with an unusual appearance emerged and came to a stop in the waters of Antarctica. What sets it apart from other ships is its 62-meter-high superstructure that rises above the hull. It's not a sad tube, although initially built as an oil drilling ship, it is now undertaking a new mission, scientific exploration. This scientific research does not focus on the surrounding waters of the area, but rather concerns the sediment layers deep beneath. On board, a group of 25 scientists awaited the lowering of the drill. First, it must pass through a 300-meter stretch of water before reaching the sediment layer. Over the next 27 hours, the drill bit penetrated multiple superimposed geological layers and retrieved valuable stratigraphic samples. One component that has particularly captured the attention of scientists is this strangely red clay layer. It is completely opposite to the two adjacent bluish-grayish-brown sedimentary layers. Though only 20 centimeters thick, that humble layer of red soil stands as evidence of an incredibly remarkable climatic period's existence. The period we are talking about occurred 56 million years ago. At that time, the average temperature on the Antarctic continent was around 15 degrees Celsius, completely different from the severe cold of today. Fossils found on islands near the Antarctic coast reveal that the region was once home to an incredibly rich vegetation, including ferns, conifers, and even flowering plants. But that's not all along the Antarctic coastline, which is also incredibly vibrant with temperate rainforests. Animal fossils are clear evidence that many species once coexisted in the same habitat. Among them were our ancestors, the most ancient primates. But how can researchers capture a comprehensive picture of the environment, temperature, and ecosystem? Doesn't it all just stem from a single, simple layer of sediment? How can humans know how the climate has changed in the past and how it has impacted life on Earth? Our initial understanding of climate change stems from fossil studies, particularly those of plant fossils. Records related to this can be traced all the way back to the 1080s by the ancient Chinese scientist Shen Kuo. He was a distinguished geologist, passionate about researching sedimentary rocks and ecological changes. Long before modern science flourished as it does today, during an observation and research session of a landslide near the riverbank. On the other side of the river, Tham Quoc accidentally discovered countless strange traces. It turned out to be fossilized bamboo, along with other buried plant species. This is truly an extremely strange story. How can bamboo grow in such barren land? Therefore, Tham Quoc surmised that, at some point in the very distant past, This area must have once had a temperate and humid climate, similar to today's primeval forests. From that point, when you discover a fossil of an animal or plant in a place where that species does not live today, you are holding in your hands evidence of the types of climate that once existed in this region. However, truly high-quality fossil specimens do more than just reveal information about the entire ecosystem. While providing evidence of the temperature and rainfall during the period in which they lived. Thanks to this, humans can estimate almost any necessary information with relative accuracy. One of the best preserved fossil specimens we have ever discovered was found in Messel, Germany. Today, this area has developed with a relatively dense population of temperate coconut palms. The average annual temperature is consistently above 0 degrees Celsius. It's puzzling how fossils could remain so perfectly preserved at such high temperatures. The mystery of this matter is still hidden away somewhere. The answer lies in the thin sediment layers at the bottom of ancient lakes. Similar to the red clay layer on the Antarctic seabed, this layer of mud and the fossils within it have indicated that here, 47 million years ago, was an entirely different land. Some notable fossils found were of antelope, horse, and primitive pig species. Like our ancestors and other species on the Antarctic coast, let's share a fresh and pleasant green living space together. But if we're talking about the most unique features, we cannot fail to mention these two fossils of a grass leaf and a crocodile. They store a vast amount of information about the climate, including indicators that are more important than we imagine. First, the pandan leaf evokes the image of a tropical paradise. Grass typically only grows in areas with an average annual temperature of around 10 degrees Celsius or lower. The temperature never drops to freezing, even in winter. The crocodile is a cold-blooded animal. It draws heat from the sun and the surrounding environment to maintain its body temperature. In addition, crocodile eggs also need to be incubated at a suitable temperature to hatch. Therefore, any areas where fossils of both species are found undoubtedly had a very warm climate in the past. And clearly, this habitat remains extremely ideal for animals in general and particularly for primates. During this period, there were no significant challenges posed by the climate. But the discovery that the average temperature in Mesa was once quite warm is only part of the problem. We have absolutely no idea why that happened. The climate, landscape, and biological communities in this area are no longer as diverse and rich as they once were. The climate can change in ways that we cannot possibly foresee. It was not until 1824, when the French scientist Joseph Fourier published his theory, that this occurred. Accordingly, he argued that the atmosphere itself has the capacity to retain heat. This discovery was built upon the understanding of a particular form of energy, which we now refer to as infrared radiation. Infrared radiation is emitted by the sun or any object with a high temperature. The wavelength of infrared radiation lies outside the visible range of the naked eye. These light waves also move more slowly when passing through the atmosphere. That is why the Earth retains heat from the sun, instead of allowing it to radiate back into space. This means the Earth's atmosphere functions in a similar way to a greenhouse. The greenhouse effect plays a role in keeping the Earth warm, helping our planet maintain a warm temperature. However, what does this have to do with climate change? If the atmosphere were that good at retaining heat, then Earth should have been consistently warm for billions of years. The cause of this phenomenon lies in the Earth's temperature changes. The components of the atmosphere determine whether Earth warms up or cools down. Perhaps the following explanation will help you better understand the issue. Several decades after Joseph Fourier's theoretical work was published, the next discovery about the greenhouse effect was made by American scientist Eunice Foote. This seemingly simple task yields a truly astonishing result. First, Eunice prepared 3 sealed glass tubes and pumped a different gas into each one, respectively, CO2, water vapor, and nitrogen. Next, insert a thermometer into each test tube and place them in direct sunlight. After a while, the temperature in the tubes gradually increased. It is not difficult to see that CO2 is the most potent greenhouse gas and the fastest at warming the planet. Stop right there. After ceasing the test tube's exposure to sunlight, CO2 is the gas with the longest cooling time among the 3 gases. The experimental results indicate that CO2 has the strongest impact on environmental temperature. When the atmosphere contains too much CO2, it absorbs more heat, retains that heat longer, and causes the Earth to enter a period of intense, oven-like heat. This change in temperature is the primary cause of the phenomenon of climate change. Eunice was the pioneering scientist who paved the way for subsequent research into the effects of CO2 on global warming. The future of climate science has been clearly defined. CO2 is a heat-trapping gas that plays a pivotal role in the atmosphere. Can atmospheric CO2 concentration be used as a thermometer to measure the temperature of an entire geological period? The higher the concentration of CO2, the warmer the climate becomes. Conversely, when the amount of CO2 decreases, the Earth's temperature cools. Scientists can reconstruct past atmospheres by analyzing air bubbles preserved in Antarctic ice layers. And even without those opportunities, we always have other choices. During the process of gas exchange, plants perform this function through small pores on the surface of their leaves, known as stomata or breathing pores. When the level of CO2 in the air is high, plants can absorb this gas more easily. For this reason, they do not need to open as many stomata on their leaf surfaces, resulting in fewer stomata on the leaves. By simply observing the number of stomata on a fossilized leaf, we can deduce the atmospheric CO2 concentration from the period when that leaf grew. Today, an equally effective method of measuring CO2 is based on carbon isotopes preserved in plant cell fossils. Yes, plants absorb carbon-12, the most common form of carbon in the atmosphere. But during periods of low CO2 concentration, they become less selective and begin to absorb the carbon-13 isotope as well. In summary, using various methods, we can calculate the amount of CO2 in the atmosphere with relative accuracy. We can fully reconstruct Earth's climate history through CO2 concentrations over the past 500 million years. From this valuable data, the climate story will reveal many fascinating insights into how the world has experienced various periods of transformation. That could be a warm period with high CO2 levels, known as a greenhouse period, and another cold period with lower CO2 levels, called an icehouse period. Approximately 500 million years ago, Earth's oceans were clear and warm, creating ideal conditions for the explosion of multicellular life. Over time, new life forms, along with geological changes, gradually reduced the amount of CO2 in the air. And then an unexpected event occurred. A severe drop in CO2 levels plunged Earth into an unprecedented ice age, triggering a mass extinction event for countless species. It was also the first major extinction event in Earth's history, known as the Ordovician extinction event. This event, which occurred approximately 444 million years ago, wiped out 85% of life on Earth. At that time, most species lived in the sea, while plants had only just begun to appear on land. The creatures that survived that great catastrophe were not only the ancestors of our human species, but also the origin of most animal species today. At the moment the event commenced, the world had completely changed from what it once was. The most noticeable difference is that most continents at that time were connected, forming a single supercontinent called Gondwana. Experts suggest that the formation of the Appalachian Mountains in North America may have been the trigger for a global cooling period, as the process sucked a massive amount of CO2 out of the atmosphere. It caused the planet to cool abruptly, making sea levels drop by tens of meters in just a short period. As a result, organisms could not adapt in time to the new climatic conditions. After that, our journey also encountered a few upheavals, but none of them were too serious. Until 200 million years ago, the climate began to warm at a gradual pace and with a modest magnitude. This dominance continued until 5 species of dinosaurs became the dominant creatures on the planet. Until the very last ice age, the Earth was still significantly warmer than it is today. It causes tropical animals and plants to appear in places you would never expect. 75 million years ago, the surface of our Earth looked completely different in many places. A large grazing animal is moving through the bushes in search of food. The snow begins to melt, the days grow longer, and the air becomes warmer. A long winter had ended, giving way to a spring that was knocking at the door of the land we now call Alaska. The Pachyrhinosaurus herd needed to lay their eggs in time to utilize the warmth to help the eggs hatch into offspring. Although the winter temperatures in those years were not too severe, this was still the Arctic. where darkness envelops like an endless stretch throughout the frigid winter months. Scientists cannot explain how this species of dinosaur could survive such a harsh period each year. We know only one thing for certain: they truly accomplished something extraordinary. Fossils of both juvenile and adult Pachyrhinosaurus individuals have been found throughout the far north, ranging from Alaska, USA, to Siberia, Russia. And it wasn't just the plant-eating dinosaurs. The carnivorous species also shared that same habitat. Why is that the case? How could dinosaurs have lived in the Arctic? One hypothesis suggests that dinosaur species inhabiting polar regions were significantly smaller than their counterparts in other areas. Some species appear to have a remarkable ability to thrive, with this Chodan species being a prime example. They were small-sized carnivorous dinosaurs that primarily inhabited the North American region. The number of this type of fossil found in Alaska is significantly greater than anywhere else. This indicates that they are not merely well adapted to the far northern region, but have also evolved in a unique way that could not have occurred anywhere else. That remarkable adaptability may be partly due to its large eyes, which grant it the ability to see clearly in the dark. And certainly, that ability is incredibly useful during the long months shrouded in darkness. Along with that, frigid weather is no longer a major concern in the Arctic region. The Arctic Circle is warming significantly, far exceeding the average temperatures people typically imagine. Of course, it couldn't have been as warm as the tropical climates where most dinosaurs lived, but it was still cold enough. The absence of any amphibians or cold-blooded animals, such as crocodiles or snakes, being able to live there. At that time, the spirit domain had not yet formed, or even if it did exist, it could not possibly withstand such extreme temperatures. The truly temperate and cool environment, coupled with the remarkable adaptability of living organisms, has ensured that the far northern region is not desolate, but rather, teems with vibrant life. Even more surprisingly, for the next 20 million years, the North Polar region continued to trend towards becoming warmer and wetter. In the early part of the Paleogene period, also known as the Paleocene epoch, approximately 55 million years ago, the Earth's temperature gradually increased. This allowed ecosystems across the globe to slowly learn how to adapt in order to survive anywhere. Under the influence of tropical rains, the subtropical region also expanded northward, extending far beyond the equator and reaching all the way to the Arctic Circle. A tropical cloud band stretches across the Arctic region, developing due to CO2 levels. The heat causes stronger water evaporation, creating massive rain clouds and accelerating this process. The Earth is truly turning into a veritable hothouse. Even regions within the Arctic Circle have recorded average temperatures reaching 16 to 21 degrees Celsius. But a greenhouse with such abundant vegetation was not exactly a paradise. As the polar regions become greener, areas near the equator become nearly uninhabitable, with average temperatures reaching over 40 degrees Celsius. But there is also no need for excessive concern. This is because the Earth is constantly undergoing geological and climatic changes. The warming trend that began 200 million years ago soon came to an end. The Earth gradually shifted to a frigid state. Once again, ecosystems were faced with the challenge of adaptation. As our world began to suffocate, evolution spurred even more astonishing changes. One of the particularly significant changes comes from this very plant. Grasses may be structurally simple plants, but their self-defense mechanisms are nothing short of remarkable. Tiny silica particles on the grass blades stand ready to wear down the teeth of any creature foolish enough to try eating them. Grass possesses an intense vitality, capable of regenerating even in the harshest conditions. Not at all, grass seeds are dispersed by the wind and do not rely on a fruit's bursting mechanism to travel long distances. The first grass species discovered in the fossil record date back to the Cretaceous period, but it wasn't until the late Cretaceous that they truly exploded in diversity and flourished. In the gradually cooling weather, the grass has grown vigorously, overwhelming other biological communities across the globe. They multiplied rapidly and began forming the first meadows. The open ecosystem began to enter a transformative phase. This was also a decisive evolutionary step that separated the ancestors of humans from other animal species. Herbivores evolved longer teeth to adapt to the wear caused by their constant grazing. They also developed many other special abilities. Some animals gather in large herds to defend against hunting attempts. Some species have instead developed the ability to run fast to escape from predators. In Africa, the primordial cradle of humankind, one cannot remain untouched by the whirlwind of change. Today, Africa is divided into vast regions, distinguished by their distinct biomes. The continental interior is home to dense tropical rainforests. From there, the forested area expands outward, gradually transitioning into vast savannas and grasslands, while the arid and sun-scorched deserts are concentrated primarily in the north. However, the strongly differentiated nature of the continent's biological communities by region is not always clearly apparent. The natural environment in Africa today is primarily shaped by the amount of rainfall it receives. The various monsoon systems in Africa are the determining factor for the amount and distribution of rainfall across the continent. Rainfall was not always predictable, even 30 million years ago, when the entire continent was a single connected landmass with countless small, isolated habitats. So what was different about Africa 30 million years ago, at the end of the Cenozoic era? Why did those things change and give rise to a powerful Africa as we see it today? Africa 30 million years ago was a land of mixed forests, interwoven with grasslands and vast, expansive woodlands. Each region has its own distinct type of climate, rather than following a single climatic pattern for the entire area. Therefore, our ancestors could easily access various environments to exploit resources, rather than being confined to a single ecological region, no matter how vast it was. This is the world of primates like Egyptopithecus, inhabiting mangrove forests and deep inland jungles, a region we now call Ica's polar regions, Africa. But strangely, the climate and rainfall in Africa have been changing in an unusual way. The cause of this phenomenon is not CO2, but rather stems from changes in other continents, particularly the Eurasian landmass. Approximately 50 million years ago, the collision between the Indian subcontinent and the Eurasian continent initiated profound changes in Asia's climate and established landscape. These two tectonic plates collided and caused seismic activity for a long time before finally merging in a stable manner. Volcanoes are also formed from fractures in the Earth's crust when two tectonic plates collide. However, at the time of the collision, both the Indian and Eurasian plates had light crusts of equivalent thickness, which were difficult to bend or break, and neither plate was dense enough to subduct beneath the other. The majestic Himalayas were formed by the collision of tectonic plates. It is precisely because of the Himalayas that volcanic activity in the geological plate collision zone has been suppressed. Atmospheric CO2 concentrations are increasingly rising. It is precisely this phenomenon that gives rise to the Asian monsoon. From there, it determines the amount and timing of rainfall for an incredibly vast area of the planet, which includes Africa. Over time, tropical forests gradually diminished and only survived in areas where monsoons brought adequate rainfall. The grasslands stretch out endlessly, forming a vast and boundless steppe. Our primate ancestors at that time faced an extremely difficult choice: or follow the shrinking forest area, adapt or perish. This very decision propelled humanity forward by leaps and bounds. Penetrating deep into nearly every corner, ginseng has conquered lands across the globe. Someone once imagined that one day the earth would become so hot that the asphalt would melt and even the iron railroad tracks would warp. This is not a scene from a movie about the apocalypse. That was the heat wave along the North Atlantic coast of North America in 1911. Thank you all for taking the time to watch this video. A severe heatwave hit coastal cities in July and lasted for 11 consecutive days, setting a new temperature record. For the first time in history, the scene of thousands of people having to sleep sprawled out on the streets every night has been recorded. Stay away from hot-tempered people like they're a blazing fire. During the record heatwave at that time, 2,000 people lost their lives. Many people are even driven crazy by the extreme heat. The world isn't always an easy place to live in. And although humans are now found everywhere, we still haven't fully adapted to the temperature. You might be very surprised, but our planet has experienced a period of mild and stable climate for the entire last 2.5 million years. However, that does not mean we are not facing changes in temperature. For millions of years, there have been periods when Earth was up to 4 degrees Celsius warmer than average, but also times when it was up to 8 degrees Celsius colder. Our ancestors successfully adapted to the process of Earth's warming. Even under the most extreme conditions, it doesn't require air conditioning. That natural mechanism remains effective to this day, though it has diminished somewhat. The simplest way to adjust your circadian rhythm is to regulate your body temperature. Simply put, it's when we move to another place to cool down our bodies. Simple actions like finding a shady spot, turning on the air conditioning, using a fan, or jumping into the water can easily solve the problem. In the long term, we need to move to cooler climates to achieve a completely comfortable life. Moreover, our bodies also have numerous physiological mechanisms to adapt to extreme temperatures. Human skin has become less hairy, with numerous sweat glands distributed widely across the body. Moreover, bipedal locomotion also proved to be an unexpected advantage. Surface area directly exposed to sunlight while increasing the body. However, despite possessing these advantages, the human body still has no shortage of limitations. During intense physical activity or high-intensity sports, our bodies often release a significant amount of heat. And in most cases, it cannot withstand temperatures above 40 degrees Celsius. At this point, we will apply the aforementioned temperature adjustment measures to perform the control. What if we can't do this? For example, we couldn't find any shade or a water source to cool down. The first thing that happens is the entire body gradually weakens. Muscles begin to stiffen and cramp, particularly in the legs and abdominal area. We continuously sweat to cool our bodies down until dehydration sets in, reducing the effectiveness of this cooling mechanism. When the body is dehydrated, the blood becomes thicker, making circulation more difficult. This leads to increased blood pressure and forces the heart to work harder to pump blood to the organs. Consciousness gradually fades, and we slip into a state of delirium or coma. And of course, the ultimate consequence is death. An important issue we must face as temperatures rise stems from a fundamental human biological trait. We are warm-blooded animals. We cannot turn off the DNA repair mechanism inherent in our bodies. However, not all of our primate relatives share these characteristics. Tiny species like mouse lemurs have the ability to reduce or even shut down the body's repair systems. This indicates that their body temperature can fluctuate between 18 and 37 degrees Celsius within a single day. Meanwhile, for humans, body temperature is considered dangerous when it drops below 35 degrees Celsius. The ability to turn off this bodily repair system is called a topper, and many small primate species are capable of doing it. They can slow down their metabolism, relying solely on ambient temperature to stay warm instead of expending energy to self-regulate their body temperature. That was an immensely profound awakening experience that ordinary people cannot attain. Therefore, as temperatures rise, we will have to make significant efforts to adapt. However, in reality, our Earth has not always had a scorching climate. As the Earth warms, human habitats begin to transform. Our living environment is increasingly fragmented, as evidenced by the gradual shrinking of tropical forests while grasslands continue to expand. Therefore, our ancestors needed to be able to travel longer distances. Once again, the upright posture created highly effective and distinctive adaptive characteristics. Walking on two legs is not only significantly faster but also far more energy efficient than moving on all fours. As a result, we can adapt and live in more diverse environments than our four-legged relatives. Most non-human primates live primarily in trees, preserving the advantages inherited from our ancestors, while courageously reaching out to explore new horizons. We may not have the best conditions to adapt, but we always know how to adapt in the smartest way. As a result, humanity has seemingly never been troubled by the temperature. However, it should be noted that the process of global warming during previous natural warming periods occurred very slowly, spanning millions, or even tens of millions of years. However, from 2013 to 2022, the Earth's temperature increased by an additional 0.2 degrees Celsius per decade due to global warming caused by human activities. Now, try to calculate how many degrees that number will rise to if we don't act immediately. Can humanity overcome the terrible climate change it has created? The steady annual increase in atmospheric CO2 concentration has been identified as the primary cause of global warming. According to Killing's research findings, the concentration of CLI gas in the atmosphere has increased by approximately 20% over the past 50 years. According to the IPCC's fourth assessment report, The global average temperature has increased by 0.7 degrees Celsius compared to the pre-industrial era. With just a 0.7 degrees Celsius increase in the Earth's temperature due to global warming, the world has already endured a series of natural disasters. Storms, floods, droughts, abnormal heatwaves, and wildfires have occurred in many regions, causing extremely severe damage to numerous countries. But wherever they are, the poor nations always bear the greatest suffering. Is this not an incredibly insightful warning for humanity? Earth will continue to undergo changes, especially during this period when humans are profoundly impacting the